Welcome to Hidden Truth. Today we are entering a disappearance that has haunted investigators, devastated a mother, and exposed painful realities about society, race, and justice in the United Kingdom. This is the story of 5-month-old baby Ames Glover, a child who vanished in the middle of an ordinary afternoon in 1990 and was never found again. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Hidden Truth, because your support helps us reveal real stories that the world cannot ignore, and your subscription keeps powerful investigations like this alive. The disappearance of a child is one of the most terrifying events any family can face. It is a nightmare that reshapes an entire life. But when a baby disappears without a single witness, without a single clue, and without a single confirmed lead, the nightmare becomes something deeper. It becomes a mystery that shatters trust and leaves families suspended between hope and despair. That is the world in which the mother of Ames Glover has been living for more than 3 decades. Our story begins on the 5th of February in the year 1990 in Southall, a busy multicultural town in West London. Southall in those years was a loud and lively place, filled with shops, families, and constant movement. It was not the kind of environment where a baby could vanish unnoticed. Yet this disappearance happened in daylight and in public. On that day, 5-month-old Ames was with his father, Paul Glover. The parents were separated at the time, and their relationship carried tension and distance. Still, it was a routine arrangement for the father to see the child. Paul placed baby Ames into the backseat of his car. He later reported that he needed to stop at a cash point to withdraw money and then collect food from a takeaway restaurant in the area. He said he believed it would be a quick stop. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous, nothing suspicious. According to Paul, the entire errand lasted around 20 minutes. But when he returned to his car, everything changed. He opened the door. The car seat was empty. 5-month-old Ames was gone. No sound was heard. No struggle was noticed. No witness came forward to say they saw a stranger near the car. The moment Paul claimed to realize that his child was missing set off one of the most complicated and controversial investigations in the United Kingdom. Police arrived quickly. Officers immediately began searching the area. They questioned pedestrians. They visited nearby shops. They knocked on doors. They checked alleys and side roads. They asked shopkeepers if anyone had seen a baby being carried, but nothing appeared. People said they saw nothing unusual. No one saw a man or woman running. No one heard a baby cry. The disappearance felt as if it had been performed in silence. As investigators tried to understand how a baby could vanish without a single witness, pressure built. A baby cannot walk away. A baby cannot remove himself from a car seat. Someone had to take him. But who had the opportunity, and how did they do it without attracting attention? The police questioned both parents, relatives, neighbors, and more than 2,000 people in total. The scale of interviews showed how desperate investigators were to find answers. The deeper they searched, the stranger the case became. There were no fingerprints pointing to an outside suspect. There was no physical evidence showing a forced entry. There were no reports of suspicious individuals. There were no confirmed sightings. Despite all efforts, investigators could not build a solid case or identify a clear suspect. The investigation lacked the essential pieces needed to move forward. This created frustration not only among officers, but also within the community. However, the collapse of the investigation did not happen only because of lack of evidence. Something else happened, something that damaged the case publicly and emotionally. Sensitive information about the family was leaked to the media. The press learned that the parents were not living together. They learned that Ames had previously been placed on an at-risk register. These details should have remained private. Their release created an impression that the family itself was unstable. This shaped the early public reaction to the case. Instead of nationwide sympathy, people became confused or suspicious. They wondered whether the disappearance was connected to personal issues rather than a stranger abduction. This shift in perception weakened the public support that could have helped in those crucial first hours. While other missing child cases in the United Kingdom received front-page coverage, urgent police appeals, and large community searches, the story of baby Ames did not rise to national attention in the same way. Journalists and social commentators later criticized this silence. Many argued that the lack of strong media coverage reflected racial bias. One of the strongest public reflections came from writer Philip Hincher in The Independent. He wrote about how society tends to respond differently depending on the appearance of the missing child. According to him, it was harder for the media to create a powerful narrative around a missing black child than one with blonde hair and blue eyes. His analysis was not only disturbing, but also deeply relevant to this case. It suggested that the disappearance of baby Ames may not have been given the attention it deserved because of the color of his skin. For the mother, 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐿, This lack of media attention was a painful addition to her grief. She had lost her child, and yet she also saw how quickly the world moved on. She felt that her son's case was not treated with the same seriousness as other cases. Her grief was both personal and public. She carried a heavy sense of injustice. She believed that if the media had acted differently, the investigation might have progressed faster. Her voice became one of the strongest forces driving the case forward. Kshenika refused to let her son's name fade away. She refused to accept silence from investigators. She refused to accept that the case was unsolvable. Her determination became the spark that reignited national attention years later. 12 years after the disappearance, in the year 2002, she pressured authorities to reopen the case. Her persistence was powerful enough to reach the right officials. As a result, the investigation was handed to Scotland Yard's Racial and Violent Crimes Task Force, a division known for dealing with cases involving racial discrimination and serious criminal actions. This reopening changed the direction of the investigation. Officers re-examined the original statements. They reviewed the timeline, the interviews, and inconsistencies in early reports. For the first time in years, the case regained structure. This new investigation also introduced new theories. Some investigators believed that the child might have been taken for illegal adoption. Others considered that the abduction could have been planned rather than random. Some looked again into individuals connected to the family. No theory was dismissed without examination. Then a new lead emerged. Authorities received a tip suggesting that Ames had been taken to Ghana in West Africa. This was one of the most significant leads since the original disappearance. In the year 2003, officers traveled to Ghana to follow the trail. They interviewed local communities. They searched records. They met two young men who had been suggested as possible identities for Ames. DNA tests were taken. When the results returned, both tests were negative. The lead collapsed. The hope that had briefly risen disappeared again, leaving the mother in another wave of heartbreak. The collapse of the Ghana lead was devastating for Kshenika. It was one of the few times in more than a decade that investigators carried genuine hope of locating her child. When the results were negative, she once again faced the same silence she had known since 1990. For many parents, a failed lead would break the remaining strength they had left. But Kshenika refused to give up. She continued to speak to the media, continued to appeal to the public, continued to push investigators, and continued to remind the world that Ames deserved answers. As the reopened investigation continued, officers began reviewing theories discussed by crime researchers, journalists, and members of the public who followed the case. Many theories appeared on community forums, investigative blogs, and missing persons networks. Although none of these discussions offer proven facts, they demonstrate how deeply the case affected the public and how many angles investigators had to consider. One major theory that emerged in public discussions was the possibility of a planned abduction. This theory suggested that someone may have been watching the family or watching the father's routine. The idea raised the unsettling question of whether someone targeted the baby on purpose. People discussing the case on community forums pointed out that a spontaneous abduction in such a public area would have been risky. They argued that if the abduction was planned, the person responsible may have been familiar with the neighborhood, comfortable with the environment, and confident enough to remove a child quickly without attracting attention. Another theory discussed by investigators and the public involved the possibility of child trafficking. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, authorities in several countries investigated illegal adoption groups and networks that operated across borders. Some members of the public believed that Ames may have been taken with the intention of being raised in another country. This idea gained traction because of the Ghana lead. Even though the DNA tests were negative, people wondered whether the tip suggested a wider network that investigators had not yet uncovered. Without confirmation, this theory remains speculation, but it shows how complex the possibilities were. A third theory, discussed both in the original investigation and in public forums, involved the possibility of someone known to the family. In some child disappearance cases, individuals connected to the family have unexpected motives or hidden involvement. This theory is sensitive and must be approached carefully. Investigators interviewed both parents extensively and questioned relatives and close contacts. They found no evidence strong enough to support charges against anyone. Still, the theory appears in public discussion because the lack of evidence against strangers forces people to consider all angles. There was also a darker theory that circulated quietly among some investigators and members of the public. This theory suggested that the child may have been harmed soon after the disappearance. There is no evidence confirming this theory, and investigators have never identified proof supporting it. However, the absence of any trace after decades has caused some people to fear the worst. This theory is painful for the mother and painful for anyone who has followed the case. it remains one of the most distressing possibilities discussed in the community. While investigators pursued these theories, they also focused on the role of the media. This case became a clear example of how public attention can affect the outcome of a disappearance. In the early days of the investigation, media coverage was limited. National newspapers focused their attention on other missing children who fit the profile that often attracts high public interest. This created a situation in which the disappearance of a black baby did not receive the same urgency or emotional investment that other cases experienced. Many journalists later criticized this difference. They described it as a failure of media responsibility and a failure of social equality. Some argued that the lack of coverage may have cost investigators valuable time in the early stages. On online communities and blogs that examined the case years later, people expressed anger that Ames did not receive the attention he deserved. Many commenters wrote that they had never heard of the case until they discovered it through investigative blogs or missing persons databases. This lack of public awareness became one of the most painful aspects for 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐬𝐬. She believed that if the country had rallied behind the search for her baby, the chances of finding him would have been much higher. As the years passed, the disappearance of Ames remained unsolved, but it did not disappear from the mother's life. She lived with constant uncertainty. She described the feeling as being trapped between hope and grief. She did not know whether her child was alive or gone. She did not know whether he was safe or suffering. She did not know whether she would ever learn the truth. That uncertainty is one of the most devastating experiences any parent can face. Investigators continued to keep the case open. They released public appeals periodically, hoping that someone might come forward. They used developing technologies such as age progression images to imagine what Ames might look like as he grew older. They reviewed old tips. They encouraged new ones. They kept the file active because they understood that the truth had not yet been found. On crime research websites and missing children forums, people shared their thoughts about why the case remained unsolved. Some believed that the initial investigation lost precious time by focusing on the parents and family for too long instead of expanding the search area immediately. Others believed that the lack of national media attention in the first 48 hours reduced the chances of finding witnesses. Some argued that cultural biases influenced how seriously the case was treated. Many users expressed sympathy for 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐬𝐬 and frustration at how society reacted to a missing black child compared to other cases. These discussions do not provide final answers, but they show how the disappearance of Ames Glover became more than a single tragedy. It became a symbol of larger issues within society. It highlighted how media representation can influence justice. It showed how families from minority backgrounds sometimes struggle to receive equal attention. It raised questions about how the police communicate sensitive information and how those disclosures affect a family's reputation during an investigation. It also emphasized how a mother's determination can alter the course of a case. One of the most emotional aspects of this story is the mother herself. 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐬𝐬 did not have financial resources, political power, or media influence. All she had was her voice and her love for her child, but she used them with strength. She used them to challenge authorities. She used them to push journalists to pay attention. She used them to reopen the case after 12 long years of silence. Her actions prove that even when the world stops listening, a mother does not. Her interviews show a woman who has lived through unimaginable pain yet continues to fight. She once said that even though she tried to build a life, a part of her remained frozen in the year 1990. The unanswered questions followed her into every day. The missing presence of her baby was something she felt every moment. She needed to know what happened to Ames. She needed closure. She needed truth. For her, the disappearance was not a historical event. It was a reality that shaped her existence. As the years stretched into decades, the disappearance of 5-month-old Ames Glover became one of the longest-lasting mysteries in the United Kingdom. Investigators, journalists, and members of the public continued to revisit the case, hoping to understand how a child could vanish in a public setting without a single confirmed witness. Many people believe that someone, somewhere must have seen something that day in 1990. Even the smallest detail could have changed everything. But that detail never came forward. The reopened investigation by Scotland Yard's Racial and Violent Crimes Task Force produced valuable insights but no resolution. Officers followed every lead, examined every theory, and contacted individuals in several countries. Yet the truth remained hidden. This raised a difficult question. How does a society respond when a disappearance remains unsolved for more than 30 years? Does it allow the case to fade into history? Or does it continue to fight for answers even when time has stolen so many opportunities? Public discussions about the case reveal that this disappearance continues to trouble people deeply. On crime forums, users often express disbelief that such a young child could be taken so quickly and so quietly. Many posts question whether the original investigation missed early clues or overlooked key witnesses. Some users argue that the leak of sensitive family information damaged public support and distracted investigators from external theories. Others believe that social biases influenced how much effort the general public invested in the search. Many commenters from missing persons communities also reflect on how different the response might have been if the case happened today. Modern technology such as instant alerts, digital surveillance, and social media would have created an immediate nationwide search. In 1990, the tools were limited. Investigators relied on witness memories, door-to-door searches, and traditional media coverage. These methods often fail when cases require rapid response. Several online researchers believe that the lack of early nationwide attention may have allowed crucial evidence to disappear permanently. Despite this, the case continues to live in public memory because of Shanika's voice. She was not willing to allow her son's story to dissolve into silence. Her determination forced the authorities to acknowledge that the case deserved more. Her persistence challenged the media. Her love for her child inspired people across the country to discuss the case again, even decades later. She showed that a mother's will can be stronger than time and stronger than bureaucracy. In interviews, Shanika described the emotional burden she carried. She explained that every year on her son's birthday she wondered where he might be. She wondered if he grew up knowing that someone loved him from the moment he was born. She wondered if he was alive and unaware of his past. She wondered if someone out there held the truth that she needed. Her voice revealed the kind of pain that cannot be measured by time. She once said that for her to heal, she needed to know what happened. Not a guess, not a theory. She needed the truth. Without it, she lived in a space between hope and sorrow. Members of the public who followed the case often commented on the strength of her spirit. Many expressed admiration for how she continued to fight despite the challenges. Some wrote that they felt ashamed that they had not known about the case earlier. Others argued that the story deserved much more national attention than it received. Several online discussions questioned whether the country had failed Shanika, not only as a mother, but as a citizen whose pain deserved equal recognition. Another element that made the disappearance of Ames so haunting was the complete absence of physical evidence. In many missing child cases, there are at least traces, a footprint, a statement, a camera image, a suspicious vehicle, a forgotten object. But in this case, the car seat was empty and untouched. The surroundings revealed nothing. There were no signs of a struggle, no fingerprints that pointed to an outsider, no witness who identified movement. The silence around the abduction created an almost impossible barrier for investigators. It felt as if the baby had been lifted into the air and taken beyond reach. Some crime researchers explored psychological theories about why witnesses sometimes fail to come forward. They noted that busy environments often reduce awareness. People walking through crowded streets may not notice unusual behavior if their attention is elsewhere. A person carrying a baby may not appear suspicious if they blend into the environment. These theories suggest that the abduction may not have been as visible as people assumed. Still, the complete lack of witnesses remains one of the most puzzling aspects of the case. As time passed, investigators attempted new strategies. They reintroduced the case to the public with updated age progression images. These images showed what Ames might look like as a teenager and later as an adult. They hoped someone might recognize him. They hoped someone might notice a resemblance. They hoped a memory might be triggered. But no confirmed matches ever came forward. Even today, the official status of the case remains open. That is a powerful statement. It means that the United Kingdom justice system has not closed the door. It means that investigators still believe the truth may be found. It means that hope, even after decades, remains alive. And it means that someone, somewhere, may still hold a piece of information that could finally answer the questions that have haunted Shanika for more than 30 years. This case raises profound lessons about how society treats missing children. It reminds us that every child deserves equal attention, equal urgency, and equal compassion. It reminds us that early media coverage can decide the direction of an entire investigation. It reminds us that communities must come together quickly because time is the enemy in the search for a missing child. It reminds us that families from minority backgrounds deserve the same public support as any other family. And it reminds us that justice cannot depend on appearance or background. The story of 5-month-old Ames Glover is not only the story of a disappearance, it is the story of a mother who never gave up. It is the story of a community that did not know enough at the time. It is the story of investigators who continue to search for truth, and it is the story of a society learning the importance of equal attention for every missing child. Even after 30 years, this case demands awareness. It demands empathy. It demands accountability. And it demands that we never forget the children who are still missing. Before we end this documentary, here are the references used in this investigation: public records and archive reports on the disappearance of Ames Glover newspaper analysis by Philip Hencher, published in the Independent United Kingdom News Archives from 1990 to 2020. Statements released by Scotland Yard's Racial and Violent Crimes Task Force. Community research from missing persons forums and crime discussion networks. Thank you for watching Hidden Truth. If you believe that every missing child deserves justice, if you believe that every forgotten story deserves a voice, and if you want to support a channel that brings truth into the light, then subscribe to Hidden Truth right now. Your subscription is not just a click, it is a commitment to awareness, a commitment to justice, and a commitment to stories that must never be forgotten. Subscribe and stand with us as we continue to uncover the mysteries that demand answers.